Hello and welcome to Fight News Now Extra. My name is John Pollock. Thank you for joining us. John Ramsden and Robin Black will be by in a minute to break down some of the stories making news today, including the Outlaw gunning for a return to the UFC in 2015, Rick Story suffers a broken ankle in victory, and Jacare Souza eyes his comeback following a successful surgery. Sidelined since 2012 with a rare heart condition known as Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, former UFC title challenger turned commentator Dan Hardy has apparently not closed the book on his fighting career. Speaking in a recent interview, the 32-year-old mentioned that he would like to return to the organization in early 2015 and already has his sights set on a potential opponent in Diego Sanchez. Hardy last saw action inside of the cage over 2 years ago at UFC on Fuel TV 5, where he outpointed former TUF winner Amir Sadallah. Well, if you thought Rick Story looked good this past weekend beating Gunnar Nelson, consider this. The welterweight apparently did so after injuring his ankle less than halfway into the fight. According to initial reports, Story believed he broke his foot early in the second round of the scheduled 5-round fight, but was unaware of the severity of the issue. Following an MRI on Tuesday night, however, it was revealed that the Washington native did in fact fracture his tibia. No word yet on how long he will be out of action or if surgery will be required. And one man coming out of a recent surgery healthy is highly regarded middleweight contender Ronaldo Jacare Souza. According to Souza's manager Gilberto Faria, the former Strikeforce champion underwent a successful procedure to his elbow to alleviate numbness. Souza is expected to be released from hospital on Wednesday and is eyeing a return to the cage in the first quarter of 2015. All right, we're here with Robin Black and the soon-to-be departing John Ramsden off to Thailand, the Cookie Monster, traveling overseas for K1 World Max, happening Saturday morning, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on Fight Network. Hear this man calling the action.
Oh, I'm super excited. Just getting the opportunity to call Buaka's fight, obviously one of the legends in the world of kickboxing, and his opponent, the future of the 70-kilogram class, and Enrico Kale, only 22 years of age. He's the super cop, an outstanding performer, and then the return of Andre Dida and the K1 debut of Paul Daly. So I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of fun in Pattaya.
Yeah, good times. A lot of, man, there's going to be unconscious men landing, looking down at you, sitting there calling the fights with eyes wide open. It's going to be
That's
spooky.
what Paul Daly can do to people, man. He lands one hook on anybody, and they are going face down.
It's one of those rare UFC free weekends, but there's still a lot of fights going on this weekend. In addition to K1, we've also got World Series of Fighting in Edmonton with Jake Shields and Ryan Ford. Bellator on Friday night, interesting fight with Eduardo Dantas and Joe Warren to have the undisputed bantamweight champion come out of that particular event, and gives at least people an opportunity to just watch some other fights that are non-UFC related. I'm curious how much interest those two respective cards get this weekend.
Well, I will tell you, in Edmonton, Alberta, everybody is going to be watching Ryan Ford because this guy is a gigantic star. You would think he's the biggest sports star to ever come out of Edmonton because people just rally behind him. He's got his clothing brand, and people just love watching him fight because Ryan Ford is an excitement fighter. He is there to knock you out with his hands or his feet, and I think that's why everybody loves him.
How does a big MMA card in Canada air live in the U.S. and we got to watch on the internet Saturday night in Canada? How's that one work?
I don't know, man. Yeah, that is a weird one. World Series of Fighting, just make a simple deal with Fight Network. We'll air it in Canada. We'll take care of that. Easy. But yeah, Ryan Ford's a star, man, like a big star. He drives an Escalade as a sponsorship. He drives a Harley as a sponsorship. He makes tens of thousands of dollars. He is one, he's rare, and you have to be pretty special, but he's proof that you can make a good living in combat sports outside of the biggest promotions if you do it your own way.
Let's chat about some of the news today. Rick Story finding out that, busting his leg in the second round of the fight against Gunnar Nelson. Hopefully not needing surgery here because I think there's a lot of momentum he's riding right now. I would argue, as big as the Johnny Hendricks win was in hindsight, at the time it really wasn't seen as this gigantic win for him. This one, though, really does catapult him as a welterweight for a lot of people to take notice from.
I agree right now. But it just depends on where Gunnar Nelson now moves in his mixed martial arts career. What happens if Gunnar Nelson loses the next 3 or next 4 of his 5 fights? It all depends on how he turns out as a mixed martial artist. Rick Story, I just love his performance in this fight. And I love the fact that he could get past the mystique of Gunnar Nelson. Oh, if this guy gets you down to the ground, this is going to happen. Oh, his striking is so unorthodox, you're not going to be able to handle it. Rick Story did a sensational job, and it's good to see him in the top, top 10. But but just the potential matchups for him at 170 pounds, very exciting.
Those two fights, Story versus Gunnar Nelson and the Rory MacDonald versus Tarek Saffiedine fight, were so cool because they both showed like extreme amount of research and studying of opponents and scouting your opponents and adjustments being made by teams anticipating the adjustments that those guys would make. They were next level stuff. And Rick Story, moving down to the lab with John Crouch, is a guy who can now play in those waters. Because if he didn't have that coach or some high-level coach, his toughness and his grit and his will and all that is great, but Gunnar Nelson works around that. He had all the answers, the leg kicks, the body shots. It was a phenomenal fight.
Robin and I chatted about this earlier this week, but want to get your thoughts of what Rory MacDonald does right now. Conventional wisdom is he just waits for the winner of Lawler and Hendricks, but we have seen many times in the past where it's just filling so many shows, you need main events, that is Rory going to get that pressure to take a fight in the meantime?
I mean, I don't think Rory's going to let pressure affect him in any way, shape, or form. If the UFC told him that he's getting the next title shot, I think he's going to wait on the sidelines. But he said in the past that he wants to be the greatest of all time, but this is also a business. Okay, yeah, sure, you can take a fight with whoever, another top 10 guy, but why take a fight, Rick Story, for example, why take a fight with Rick Story when you can fight for the title and the next time you're fighting Rick Story is for way more money because you're the champion. So I'm sure that the motivation is become the champion and then I'm down to fight whoever the UFC puts in front of me.
There's always a lot of moving parts, and one of these moving parts is a rumored event in Montreal in March. You want Rory on that headlining. What do? You put him on there, you say starring Rory MacDonald, and you wait to see who wins that fight. If it's really close or if it's odd in some way and they have to have a rematch, you got Rory for the #1 contender. If it's a definitive fight, he fights Rory in Montreal in March.
The fight poster is just Rory with that dead stare right before the fight on Saturday night. Could be great. Dan Hardy, Diego Sanchez. Does that intrigue you in 2015 if everything can come together?
I'm down. These are the type of fights I like for Diego Sanchez and for Dan Hardy. I think these are two action fighters, and we're going to get to see a show.
That was my Rory MacDonald impression, by the way.
For Robin Black, the departing John Ramdine. Catch him in Thailand Saturday morning. I'm John Pollock. More Fight News Now Extra is coming up.